Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, fuck of the century.
I knew you were going to say that. And it's entirely appropriate for you to say such a thing, because in this season of Awesome Movie Year, we have been talking about the films of 1992, and we're here at our season finale when, as always, we have polled our audience asking you what movie we should talk about, and we always come up with a theme. This season, our theme was femme fatales, because these kinds of thrillers were huge in the 90s, and especially in 1992. We asked you whether we should talk about Single White Female, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, or this movie that you chose called Basic Instinct. And it was not a surprise to me that Basic Instinct won, because it was such a hugely popular movie.
They went right for the vagina.
That's one way to put
it. You're a little lost for words there, Josh. Maybe you need author Catherine Trammell to help you think of what to say next year.
Yeah, maybe so. She seems to be able to write a book in like a week. So she's obviously good at coming up with words, which maybe Catherine Trammell should have a podcast. That could be Basic Instinct 3. Catherine Trammell has a podcast.
And that's probably what would happen too nowadays.
What's up the dress?
Yeah. Right. And every podcast guest ends up dead.
I mean, it's so, yeah, right. It's so funny because, look, obviously this was the big thing. Like, oh, there's a scene and her legs are spread and you see her vagina and everything. And it's like, it's such a brief second, and you don't really see anything more than, even if you did, it's a vagina, guys. Like, it's so crazy that this was the biggest deal. I get it where people they say it's the most paused upon frame in movie history on home video and everything. But the idea that this whole movie is based on one shot with a vagina is so crazy to me.
Yeah, I feel like you would have to pause it in order to really see anything. Watching it again this time, I remembered that scene, and it's super famous. Even if you've never seen the movie, you would know that scene was coming. That was a big deal. And I was just amazed watching it this time. Yeah, how brief it is, how far away it is, and how much of a big deal that has been and continues to be. I feel like anyone, if you mention this movie, that is the one thing that they know about it. That is the one thing that they think of.
And they talk about it, how Verhoeven says Sharon Stone knew. Sharon Stone says she didn't know, but she says that Verhoeven made the right choice because from a story standpoint, it really does give power to that character. But it's the vagina that lives on, Josh.
It does live on. Thankfully, it's not dead yet. Poor Sharon Stone. So anyway, there's more to this movie than just that scene. Although, again, sometimes you wouldn't realize that there is because that's all that people talk about. And that's what they were talking about in 1992. This movie was a huge, huge hit. It grossed $352.9 million on its budget of $49 million. It was the fourth highest grossing film of 1992. Trying to think of a movie like this being the fourth highest grossing movie of the year in 2022. We are not getting any Marvel characters flashing their genitals.
Right. I was going to say,
it's not going to happen.
Number one, which we talked about, was Aladdin. Imagine if Jasmine had shown what was going on.
I'm sure many people do imagine that, and you can find it on the internet.
It would give a whole new meaning to "I can show you the world."
Oh boy.
Okay, so also this was a very controversial film. I read multiple different citations for how much exactly they had to cut out of this film to achieve the R rating versus the NC-17 rating. I think Wikipedia says it was 35 to 40 seconds, but then reading through reviews, different reviewers had different numbers that they cited. I think Siskel and Ebert mentioned 68 seconds or something like that. But certainly it was one of these movies where they're making these tiny little edits to just get it to the exact maximum amount of thrusting and nudity and whatever on screen so that they can get this R rating and not get an NC-17. And that was something that everyone knew about. Again, when this came out, it was this was the movie that was so hardcore that was nearly rated NC-17.
Thrusting on someone's pelvis, bad. Thrusting ice pick into their face. Okay.
Right. Yes. Although I think to be fair, one of the cuts was some number of ice pick thrusts in the opening murder. So they did care a little bit about violence. But yes,
but I think that's only because she was still thrusting on him while she was ice picking him.
True. There's multiple kinds of thrusts happening
at
the same time. And yes, of course, the MPAA is still to this day extremely hypocritical about depictions of sexuality versus depictions of violence in movies. Those Marvel characters can kill literally billions of people in their films and get a PG-13, but God forbid Captain America fucked,
right?
Because that wouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, well, he's got a real nice, really good, clean American relationship, Josh, with his wife.
He does.
They had babies by magic.
Captain America did? No, that was Wanda. Are you thinking of WandaVision?
No, I'm just saying you could never see him have sex, so he would have to have a baby by magic.
Oh, okay. Because there was also the show where they literally had babies by magic, but
right. See, I can't even make a joke because Marvel's already actually done it in a different setting. So.
Yeah, let's move on from Marvel maybe and talk about Basic Instinct again. So this is one of these movies, and I feel like this has come up weirdly multiple times. This is one of these movies that was nominated both at the Oscars and at the Razzies. It was nominated for 2 Oscars for Best Editing and Best Original Score. It was also nominated at the Golden Globes for Best Actress for Sharon Stone, as well as for the score. And the Razzies it was nominated for were Worst Actor for Michael Douglas, Worst Supporting Actress for Jeanne Tripplehorn. And in one of these things that the Razzies do that are super annoying, where they make up little cutesy things to nominate, they nominated Worst New Star for Sharon Stone's tribute to Theodore Beaver Cleaver, which I assume is a play on the word cleaver, I guess. I don't know.
No, it's a play on the word beaver because she shows her vagina.
Oh.
Have I not mentioned that yet? It's a lame Razzie thing.
Not.
And first of all, I thought her vagina gave at least an adequate performance.
Fair enough.
For the split second.
That's true. That's why I was thinking of the stabbing, I guess.
Yeah, you were way off, Josh.
Is unimpeachable.
Yeah, that's right. So, but that's what it must have been for. And it's so lame that they did that, Josh.
You're right. Yeah, it is extremely lame. I was like on Wikipedia, like, what did the beaver do on Leave It to Beaver that was like this movie?
Josh, you just didn't grow up in like the playground where they were talking about, slang, I saw some beaver.
Yeah, I think of it from like The Naked Gun, like, that's quite a beaver.
Yeah, nice beaver.
Yeah. It's slang for vagina, Josh.
Yes. In case our listeners were wondering what that
was. Well, you were wondering what
it
was, I feel like.
I was. Well, I know that if you had asked me, I just wasn't making that proper connection. But yeah, in conclusion, fuck the Razzies, right? As we've said many times.
Yeah, it's pretty lame. But Josh, what I thought, first of all, even beyond that, Michael Douglas and Jeanne Tripplehorn didn't really deserve Razzie nominations either for that.
Not at all.
And how about the fact that it was... I tried to place this in context of today and how this would never happen. It was nominated for 6 MTV Movie Awards and 1 for Best Female and Most Desirable Female. Obviously, I don't think they'd ever give a Most Desirable Female award anymore.
Yeah, they must have cut those awards. That would definitely not fly.
Yeah. So, and also this movie would never be nominated on an MTV movie. The 90s were so much more edgy than you snowflakes are today.
I mean, I wonder though, like, was 50 Shades of Grey nominated for an MTV Movie Award? It wouldn't surprise me if it was. So I feel like it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility. Like, no, I'm sure they don't offer those Most Desirable awards anymore, but the idea that a controversial, sexy movie might get MTV Movie Award nominations, I feel like that could still.
It was nominated for Best Kiss and Breakthrough Performance.
50 Shades of Grey was?
Yeah, MTV Movie Awards.
See, there you go. Anyway. Tune in for our new podcast on the history of the MTV Movie Awards.
Something that I want to start. So let's do it.
All right. Yeah. Dave's going to make it happen. So this movie, obviously, I mean, it made a lot of money with at the box office. It was enjoyed by audiences. It got a B+ from CinemaScore, the audience polling service, which is pretty strong for a controversial movie, because I feel like these kinds of films, a lot of people will like performatively go to see them just to hate them. So the fact that it got that good rating when I'm sure that was like a balance between a bunch of A's and some F's or whatever is on the whole pretty good. But critics were definitely mixed on this film. Siskel and Ebert gave it 2 thumbs down and did not care for it and spent a lot of time making complaints that to me are really missing the point of what this movie is. Ebert, and I'll read some from his review, was really fixated on the ending and the idea that you don't know for sure, or rather that the final shot, the literal final shot of the movie is all that tells you who the real killer is, and that it could have been another way were it not for the final shot. And that I don't know. I feel like it's weird for Ebert to be complaining about something that's ambiguous or whatever.
Well, we've seen that before. I think we've seen that before with him on we talked about that on a different episode. But
it could be.
So get ready. Here come the spoilers.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, he doesn't specifically spoil why that is or what is in the final shot, but really does talk about that. And Siskel basically complained that without the sex scenes, this movie would be worthless, which A, I don't think is true. And B, like, that's like going back to Marvel. That's like saying, oh, without the action scenes, this movie would be worthless. Like, it's an action movie. You know, this is an erotic thriller. It's a movie that has sex as its essential element. Like, you can't just say without these particular scenes, there would be nothing to this movie. Like, the scenes are in there because they're part of the movie. So I felt like they really, even though Ebert has proved himself in many of our past episodes that we've quoted to be extremely horny, he just didn't appreciate this one.
Well, let's hear it, Josh.
So yes. So in his written review, Roger Ebert said, "This is not a movie where the outcome depends upon the personality or behavior of the characters. It's just a wind-up machine to jerk us around. I left the movie feeling depressed and manipulated because it didn't matter how hard I tried to follow the plot and figure things out. The whole movie was just toying with me. It kept me interested and guessing right up until that final shot, which revealed that all of my efforts were pointless, since the guilt or innocence of the characters was a flip of the coin, based on evidence that could be read both ways."
I probably wouldn't have gone with jerk us around for this movie.
Yeah, maybe not the best choice of words there.
I mean, so you're saying he wanted it more clearly cut as opposed to less clearly cut there, or what?
I think he wanted to be able to figure it out himself. Like, and this is a thing that I personally find annoying about the way that certain people watch mystery movies and the way that some of mystery films are constructed, where it's like it's a word problem or something. Like, if you wrote down enough details and you added them up together, you could figure out the answer at the end of the movie. Like, that is not the point of a movie. A movie is not a puzzle, a puzzle piece, Dave. A movie is not a word problem.
Yeah.
And so a movie is a story. And sometimes in the story, you can't figure it all out because the characters can't figure it all out. So yeah, I think that was what he wanted. Yeah. He wanted to be able to figure it out himself and not have to rely on that final shot, which is ambiguous. And we can talk about this more later, maybe, but who really is the murderer? I don't think you get a definitive answer there at the end.
I agree, because you can say the final shot tells you who it is, or you could say this person has free reign based on everything that's gone out to commit a crime like that. But I think the bigger point here, Josh, is what you're saying is if you have a podcast where you put puzzle pieces about movies, about how you're a huge piece of garbage, there's some accuracy to that, Josh. And I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, of course, it's not the kind of puzzle pieces that Dave takes into account. But I feel like this is...
Yeah, if I may, actually, it has nothing to do with that. But like, I think, and we talked about this with the Sixth Sense episode when we did 1999, like ever since twists have just been such a big part of movie making in the last 20 years, everyone's always trying to beat movies. And that's something that's always bugged me.
Right, I think so. And I think we see this a lot too now with like serialized TV shows, that people are only satisfied if they can like solve the puzzle. And it's like, why are you watching stuff? Like, what do you like narrative art? No.
Go play a video game.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't mind if I kind of like it when I can't solve it. And then like it comes together and then as long as it makes sense, then I'm like, cool, that's pretty good. Like there was that great limited series on HBO called The Head, which was about a murder mystery in Antarctica. And like, you know, I did not solve that, but at the end, it was such a wild turn and they made it work. I was like, man, that's awesome that you guys did that.
And I think that's great. Absolutely. If you can get to the end of something and there's a plot twist and you think back and you realize how it all added up. I also think it's cool when movies are just weird and surreal and you get to the end and you're like, no, that didn't make sense. But what a ride that movie took me on. And I was fascinated the whole time. And I feel like that's more of what we're getting here with Basic Instinct.
So you like movies?
Apparently other people don't. Or at least I feel like they're not. Anyway, we'll get off that topic and talk about Janet Maslin in the New York Times, who enjoyed this movie. And I feel like most of the way that if critics enjoyed it, they looked at it as kind of a guilty pleasure. And so she said, Mr. Verhoeven is not seriously inconvenienced by the script's inconsistencies, or even by the fact that it eventually devolves into a series of house calls. The director's forte is slam-bang sensationalism of the sort that transcends ordinary nitpicking, and his skill is readily apparent. Basic Instinct transfers Mr. Verhoeven's flair for action-oriented material to the realm of Hitchcockian intrigue, and the results are viscerally effective even when they don't make sense. Drawing powerfully on the seductiveness of his actors and the intensity of their situation, Mr. Verhoeven easily suspends all disbelief.
So, I mean, and I'll get to it in our next segment, but there is one thing that didn't make sense to me that really took me out of the whole movie from enjoying it more. But I do agree, performances are top notch. I mean, Sharon Stone just smolders off the screen. Well, some of her best work, I think, and, you know, obviously her star-making performance. And, you know, Michael Douglas is who did these types of movies better than him.
Yeah, I agree. I think the performances here are all really good. Certainly not Razzie worthy in any way. I think they're really good also because they're exactly pitched to the kind of movie that this is. The kind of movie that Paul Verhoeven is making, which is this elevated trash. It is stylized ridiculousness. And that is what he's good at. That's what he did in his action movies before this, in Total Recall and RoboCop. And that's what he does here too. So I think if a different director had made this script, and we'll talk about maybe the ridiculousness of Joe Eszterhas's career and the insane amounts of money he was paid for these scripts that probably didn't deserve that. Without Paul Verhoeven, this would not have worked, or at least without a director of Paul Verhoeven's skill, this would not have worked. But it's entertaining because he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's in full command of the tone of this movie the whole time.
Well, Josh, to defend Mr. Eszterhas here, after the script was bought for $3 million, Verhoeven hired a writer to write 4 different drafts of it, which got worse and worse to the point where Eszterhas took his name off of it until Verhoeven realized, hey, this is getting horrible. I'm going to go back to the original draft. So I do give him credit for going back to that, but you got to give Eszterhas his credit for writing the script they should have made.
Yeah, and I don't want to discount Eszterhas entirely. I mean, this is a crazily constructed script. It does have some extremely memorable lines of dialogue in it, as Jason alluded to at the beginning of this episode, which I think they say the fuck of the century like 3 times in this movie, which is definitely...
It gets a little, I think 1 would have been enough.
Yeah, so. one the first time he says it, you're like, oh, wow. And then it's just like Eszterhas was really proud of himself for coming up with that, and had to put it in there a couple more times.
Fuck of the century. Yeah. So, and the writer was Gary Goldman, who he hired to write 4 more drafts. So, you know, they sold this movie for $3 million, and then this guy did 4 rewrites. So how much was the script altogether? It really doesn't matter because it made so much money overall.
Right. And that was the thing with this era of these huge script sales, is that as long as the movies were huge hits, they were happy to keep parceling out that kind of money. And I think we talked about this when we talked about Lethal Weapon 2 back in our 1989 season, and Shane Black, who was the other major one, along with Eszterhas, who was making this insane amount of money for screenplays. And once those movies stopped being hits, then suddenly it was like, oh, wait, we don't want to spend this money on screenwriters anymore.
Right.
Much like they talk about in The Player.
But Josh, what's more fun for Eszterhas is all the money he was paid for scripts that never got made.
Right. Well, I mean, and I think that was the thing, is that as that happened with those scripts, and instead of them turning into the 4th highest grossing movie of the year, they turned into flops or they turned into movies that never got made, the studios no longer wanted to pay that kind of money for screenplays anymore. And we'll talk about that later, I'm sure, with the legacy when we talk about Eszterhas's later career. Finally, on the critic front, Peter Travers in Rolling Stone also had kind of a guilty pleasure take on this film. He said, "Basic Instinct doesn't waste time establishing priorities. This is one charged up erotic thriller. Gory, lurid, brutally funny, and without a politically correct thought in its unapologetically empty head. Still, director Paul Verhoeven's cinematic wet dream delivers the goods, especially when Sharon Stone struts on with enough come-on carnality to singe the screen. What makes Basic Instinct a guilty pleasure is this shameless and stylish way Verhoeven lets rip with his own Basic Instinct for disreputably alluring entertainment. The film is for horny pups of all ages who relish the memory of reading stroke books under the covers with a flashlight."
Whoa, my.
Yeah. Peter Travers never holding back on that kind of.
I don't know about reading. I mean, imagine that back in the day where you had to read to masturbate. That seems like a lot of work.
Yeah, Jason doesn't want to put that kind of effort into his masturbation.
It's a visual medium, Josh.
Some people have imaginations, Jason.
Well, and some people just like seeing, quick frames of vaginas.
They do. I'm sure. Well, let's get off. Not.
Hey, bang! This guy is seeing some beaver.
Let's move on from that. One thing kind of alluded to in terms of like political correctness that Peter Travers mentions there is that, like another movie that we talked about last season, Cruising, this movie was protested heavily by the gay community at the time, including some of the same stuff that they did with Cruising, trying to disrupt the filming by making noises and protesters at the locations where the movie was being shot. And the idea that the Sharon Stone character, who is depicted as maybe being a killer, and really all of the characters who are maybe the killer are bisexual or gay, and that it was this sort of cliched depiction, I guess, of the predatory gay character. And I think on the one hand, you can watch this movie and say it is not exactly a progressive representation of queer sexuality. But on the other hand, everything about it is so over the top. And as I think Roger Ebert or maybe Gene Siskel pointed out, it's not like the straight people in this movie come off well,
Right.
So I think from a modern perspective, in part because we mentioned this with Cruising, in part because there were just not as many representations of LGBTQ characters on screen. If there was one and it was negative and it made them out to be a killer, that was really upsetting. Whereas now we have a much wider range of those kinds of depictions. And so if there's one particular film or TV series that has a gay character who is evil, who is villainous, it's not as big a deal.
I'm not a gay killer. I'm a killer who happens to be gay.
Yes, thank you, Jason.
But Josh, what's interesting is, Cruising's 1980. This is 92. Here's a fact. That's before the internet became popular. So the fact that everyone knew like that this was going on and they were protesting it while making it is like, was there like just a big subscription to the trades back then? And, like different groups of
well, I think because maybe in part because this movie was shot in San Francisco, which of course has a large gay community, that all it takes is for one activist group to get the idea of what's going on here. Maybe they read the trades, maybe they read a local newspaper report, whatever it is, and they spread the word amongst the community. They have community meetings, they have flyers. I mean, any way that you spread the word about anything before the internet.
Flyers.
Yeah, exactly. Flyers. That was a thing. And so you have that community here already. I mean, they're shooting in a place where that community is prevalent. And so the word gets out that way. I don't know that there were people traveling from other states or whatever to come protest this, but certainly locally, there's a way for the word to get out.
Yeah. This movie has many other issues. Like I would protest the gaps in logic, but that's cool.
Well, obviously a lot of critics protested that. So did you see this under your bed covers or whatever?
How
as
dare
a
you,
young
sir?
teenager,
How
Jason?
dare you? I had actually never seen this film, Josh. I'm a good,
Okay.
wholesome,
Yeah.
pornography. I got other things never mind. I've never seen it before, Josh.
Yeah. Did you remember hearing about it? I mean, I feel like because we were teenagers around this time, this is something that would have been like sort of forbidden, but that peers and friends would talk about like, oh, I got to see this or whatever. Did that happen with you?
I mean, I knew about this, and I think everyone knew about it, but it wasn't like woods porn where you pass down, porn from one older kid to one younger kid, by leaving it under a rock in the woods. Woods porn. What a time to be alive.
Yeah,
So.
that is weirdly a thing. I feel like I did hear about it more, and I saw it maybe when I was a little older, maybe in high school or college. So it would have been several years after it came out, but it was still sort of like semi-illicit, maybe, even though I was certainly at that point old enough to rent an R-rated movie.
Right. So you weren't seeing it because like it was, you were seeing it because like, oh, I should see the movie.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was a very famous, very successful movie that is also known for being sexy and titillating, and it was worth seeing. So I think I watched it at the time, and I think I liked it then. I don't remember for sure exactly, and if I was let down by whether it was sexy enough to live up to all the hype of it, which is often something that is disappointing. But I did watch it back when I was younger, and I think enjoyed it. And I had enjoyed I loved RoboCop and Total Recall as a kid and as a teenager. So I certainly was all in on Paul Verhoeven back then.
Two excellent erotic thrillers.
Well, other films by this director that are similarly over the top in a different genre. So, Dave, did you watch this on a movie night with your parents?
Yeah. Hey, Dave, it's your 8th birthday. I got just the thing. Wait till you see this bush, eh?
Guys, I think I did.
Oh, wow.
I 100% saw Showgirls on New Year's Eve with my parents and their best friends and their kids. But I'm pretty sure we also watched Basic. Yeah,
like all together, sitting and watching.
It was New Year's Eve. It was our entertainment for New Year's Eve, watching Showgirls. I'm almost certain we watched Basic Instinct with them too.
You know what's so bothersome about this, Josh? Not the situation. Like we're all amused by it, but that Dave has turned out so well adjusted. It's really bothersome to me. Like you and I are both in therapy, but Dave isn't. This is bullshit. I call it right now.
Oh, good for Dave. Maybe this was the healthy thing to do. Maybe Dave's parents had it right. Show the kid all of this inappropriate material at a young age, and they won't be sneaking around later on getting a complex about it. So maybe they had the right idea.
Well, I mean, that's not why I'm in therapy, but that was very revealing about yourself, Josh. But anyway, I just can picture like Dave's dad coming home one day. Dave, when you get to the bench in the woods, go out and make a left. I left something for you under the mossy rock.
No, see, what's better about it is that it's not that. It's that they're together watching it. It's not like, hey, Dave,
safety.
check this out. It's like, this is family night. This is what we do together as a family.
When that scene came on, Dave, like with Sharon Stone showing, what did you say? Dave, that's what you call a pussy right there, or something like that.
I'm sure it was just laughter is all it was. So, yeah.
All right, let's move past this. Anything else on the background of this film that you would like to mention, Jason?
Josh, I feel like we've already covered the entire movie. I want to say one thing. One thing that I thought was very smart that they did was they surrounded the Michael Douglas, because Michael Douglas wanted a major star to be playing the Catherine part, and he didn't get there. They went to like 13 actresses, Josh. But one thing that they did really well was give Douglas and Sharon Stone a supporting cast of like excellent character actors. Like we recognize almost every actor in this movie from being like one of the preeminent character actors of like the 90s and 2000s and before, obviously, too. So I thought that was really good. And Josh, it did get a Best Score Academy Award nomination for Jerry Goldsmith.
Yeah, it got those 2 Oscar nominations along with the editing nomination. So, and that's a very good score, worthy of the nomination. Yeah. So we'll come back then and talk about more of our general thoughts on Basic Instinct. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this season finale of our season on the films of 1992, we are talking about our sick and twisted audience's choice of Basic Instinct. Thank you all for choosing this film.
And if you haven't seen it and want to watch it with Dave's parents, we will offer that to you as an Awesome Movie Year experience.
Yeah, sign up for the Patreon and you can watch Basic Instinct with Dave's parents.
Oh yeah,
that's a reward.
Yeah, is it? I don't know if it is.
Yeah.
So, Jason, I mean, we've talked all about here, like the controversy about this film and the sort of sexiness of it. But as a movie, like, did you enjoy watching this movie?
I was enjoying it. And then there was like, you know how we talk about there's a gap in logic of something that's so big that you can't get past it. At least for me, that takes me right out of a movie. Okay. So like, I love, you know, we've talked about this kind of like with the fog, that kind of like Northern California oceanfront setting. I thought they did a really good job of showcasing San Francisco. The eroticism was up to snuff, so to speak. You know, and like I said, like Douglas and Sharon Stone, there's palpable chemistry there. I like all the supporting actors. But what bothered me, Josh, and I can't get past this, is the rest of the police department, including Nick Curran's bosses, Michael Douglas's bosses, knew that he was sleeping with Jeanne Tripplehorn's character, the doctor, and yet they kept saying, hey, you have to go see the doctor for your appointment. I don't think that would ever be a thing, ever, in any era. Not just now as a conflict of interest, but ever. And it's just so convenient and such a lazy way to do things. It really bothered me.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong about that. It is a little ridiculous that that would happen and that they certainly all knew, right? Because every time, even after the first meeting in the film that he has with her, he goes back and his partner gives him is kind of ribbing him or whatever about whether they're going to get back together. So yeah, that was totally absurd. And especially, I think later in the film, there's one point where he's even in more trouble because he's gotten way too close to Catherine Trammell, and they are like, you have to have a psych evaluation. And at least in that scene, he goes into the psych evaluation and Jeanne Tripplehorn is like, here are two other psychiatrists that are here to evaluate you. Like, finally.
That aren't fucking you, right?
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
So.
And that's the only time that they bother with that. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you that that is ridiculous and completely unrealistic. On the other hand, I feel like everything in this movie is so ridiculous and so unrealistic that I just went with that too.
But see, to me, it's like I could see a cop getting involved with the suspect or something like that, right? And this is such an easy fix. You either say, hey, you know, we got to keep this a secret, otherwise my job's in stake, right? Or something like that. I mean, that does it right there. Then they still have their relationship and no one knows about it, and actually ratchets it up because nobody knows about it, right? So, and then you can do a reveal at some point, you know, to the partner, to Gus, and that adds like an extra layer. So it's just such an easy fix. And it wasn't just like a one scene thing. It's a major plot point in this movie that it just took me right out of the whole thing, which is a real bummer because I enjoyed so many other elements of it.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong that it maybe could have been fixed easily. It could have added another layer of secrecy. It didn't take me out of it because, again, I don't know. I guess I just thought, okay, whatever. I'm going along with all the rest of this. I might as well go along with this too. But you know, that's certainly a valid point that you're making about the story here. You know, there's so much. I initially thought when you were talking about San Francisco and the beach and things like that, I thought your complaint was going to be that Michael Douglas was able, or both he and Sharon Stone were able to drive to Carmel very, very, very quickly.
Neither of them ever caught traffic anywhere, right?
I just kept thinking, like, there's one scene where he goes and he talks to her for like 30 seconds and then leaves. And it's like, did you just drive 2 hours to do that?
Yeah. There were a lot of scenes like that, actually. So
yeah. So, but again, it didn't bother me. It was amusing to me rather than annoying.
Well, I don't mind that because that's like kind of tropish of like the over the top ridiculousness of the genre. Like, right. But then again, you're like, okay, at least that scene had a purpose, right? Like he went, he did his thing and that's it. Like, so you can be like, that's a long way to drive for that, but at least it makes like sense from a purpose standpoint. What I can't wrap my head around is how like no one in the police department, including his bosses, would be like, hey, you know who shouldn't be your doctor? The lady you're having sex with, who's clearly in love with you. Like, that's just ridiculous. It's just, as I said, it's lazy. It doesn't help the movie. If you actually put the time in, you could have elevated the movie and made it better. So like, it really spoiled the whole movie for me, which is a strange thing for one point like that. But because it was so, that seeped into so many aspects of the story, it did ruin the film for me, Josh.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I definitely did not feel that way. And I wonder if in any of those 4 rejected drafts by another writer, if they changed that aspect of the story in any way, if that was one of the things that they changed and reverted to. I guess we won't.
I mean, you think of how many people have to like say, put their stamp of approval on something to get it made. And like, no one's like, hey, doesn't this seem weird? And like, it could never happen. It's frustrating to me.
I guess I feel like that could apply to a lot of things. Like the police department in this film, not an effective law enforcement organization on the whole. I feel
They're all
like making a
terrible.
lot of mistakes. And what I love too is that they do massive unethical things. Like Nick Curran, Michael Douglas's character, spends more than half of this movie investigating the case while he is suspended and not supposed to be doing anything. Gets involved romantically, sexually with the prime suspect, is on the scene while crimes are being committed. And at the end of the movie, the captain or whatever just looks at him and is like, well, guess you were right. And you just like, well, I guess he's back on the force now. No problem.
I mean, he's not the first suspended cop to investigate something that we've seen.
Of course he's not. This is a common cop movie cliche, but in reality, if you are a suspended cop and you do that, you are not allowed. And the evidence is not admissible in court and things like that we ignore in movies because the movie is a movie. And so I guess I felt like the thing with the psychologist was in the same level as that.
Well, I guess, yeah, to me, it was just too much. But like all the rest of this stuff, like you were saying, how like I'm having sex with you so I can write a book about you. That sounds fine to me. Like, none of that was like, all that was okay with me.
Right. And again, I love that Catherine Trammell, I don't know how long, but I feel like this movie takes place over the course of a week, 2 weeks, maybe something like that. And in the entire court, like in that short amount of time, Catherine Trammell meets Nick Curran, thinks, I'm going to write a book inspired by this guy's life, writes a whole book and has like the cover designed at the end of the movie as she's printing it out on her dot matrix printer.
Right.
And, an unrealistic depiction of the publishing industry.
Is it though? Because Joe Eszterhas wrote this script and we know he's written, I think maybe even the first draft of this one in like 10 days or whatever, right?
Yeah.
In Showgirls, he wrote in like a week, right? Yeah. So maybe he's like, maybe he has like, his books sound really interesting to me. Maybe he churned those out in a week. You never know. Maybe he's Catherine Trammell and he wants to show his vagina to the cops.
I guess that is possible. And we have to look and see if Joe Eszterhas's associates have been murdered / committed murders.
Oh, so, that there's a few murders around Eszterhas, Josh.
That's probably true. Let's not just make horrible accusations about this guy.
I didn't say anything. I'm just saying in that satellite, that circle. I mean,
Yeah.
There's probably been a few murders.
Yeah.
Actually, I think he wrote about it in one of his books. That was like the basis for this character. It was like when he was a young reporter, he went to check something out and it led to a murder or something.
Well, yeah, I'm sure as a reporter, you would have come across that. Yeah, maybe Catherine Trammell is inspired by Joe Eszterhas's own life, I guess.
Hey, Dave, what were your parents' favorite sex scenes when you guys watched it together?
Can't say I recall that.
You didn't ask. You didn't go through a detailed rundown.
No.
I feel like the sex scenes in this movie really are just on the border between actual sexiness and like total laughable absurdity. And like watching this, maybe I'm naive, but some of the things that like I'm like, are people having sex like this? I'm not sure.
What was the one where you didn't think they could have sex like that, Josh?
I mean, not that they couldn't necessarily, although there were some scenes where, you know, I remember when we talk about The Room and the sex scenes where Tommy Wiseau is thrusting and you're like, he's thrusting in the wrong location there.
Yeah, well, that one I get.
There was some of that.
I also thought about The Room when Michael Douglas is walking away and you get like the, you know, obligatory butt shot, you know, as he's walking away.
Yeah.
Yeah, but who doesn't want to see Michael Douglas's butt?
Right,
So.
yeah. I mean, you have to give, like, Michael Douglas's butt is way more welcome on screen than Tommy Wiseau's butt.
Well, don't body shame Tommy Wiseau, sir. Hey, Josh, but no, what was the sex scene where you were like, are people having sex like this?
I mean, I think the way that she's sort of like convulsing and like just way overdoing it, Sharon Stone, as she's riding Michael Douglas, or as she's riding, or I don't know if it's actually her in the opening scene, because of course we're meant to be unsure who it is. I don't know if they used the body double or what exactly they did in the opening murder scene. But, you know, it reminded me of that infamous scene in Showgirls where they have sex in the pool and she's like pounding on the water or whatever. And it's just like,
well, you have to, because I mean, I can explain the physics to you at another point in time if you want to talk about pool sex, Josh.
I mean, but that's a notoriously ridiculous and bad sex scene, that scene in Showgirls. And I just feel like some of the scenes in this movie were not all that different from those scenes in Showgirls.
Yeah. Well, hey, same team, right? So.
Right. Exactly.
But Josh, can I just say, if we're going to go on a little side tangent, you know, erotic thriller, not that far from softcore pornography. And in softcore, there are always these sex scenes in a hot tub. Have you ever tried having sex in a hot tub? It's not very good. It doesn't help the hot tub or the sex, to be honest with you.
No, I've never tried that. But I always think about that when characters in movies have sex on beaches. Like, I'm like Anakin Skywalker with the sand, you know? I don't like sand. It gets everywhere. Like, having sex on a beach seems like it would be the most uncomfortable, unpleasant experience you can possibly have. But it looks great in movies. It's always so erotic and exciting and the characters love it.
Yeah, I think I'd rather have sex on the beach than in a hot tub.
Really? With all the sand?
I mean, the hot tub, there are different things that you need for sex to work, Josh, and the hot tub negates a few of those things. So it just doesn't help the motion of the ocean, so to speak, the connection between the two people, the penis and the vagina, the synergy between those two just aren't there with the hot tub, Josh.
You can't see it, but Jason is making some very strong motions with his hands as he's
just,
talking about
so,
this.
There's you need as never mind. Just go on.
Yeah, let's move on from that as well. I feel like I keep saying that in reference.
You can put a blanket down on the sand. You can't put a blanket.
Yeah, but you have you been to the beach? You put a blanket down, and the sand still gets on it. Like it's inevitable.
All right.
I'm uncomfortable at the beach even when I'm not having sex.
I'm with Dave.
I don't think you're a beach sex type guy, Dave. You're not a beach sex type guy.
I don't want to go to the beach, period.
Yeah.
Your parents might be. I bet Sonny and Rich threw down at the beach, on an airplane, in a Burger King
This is going
bathroom.
a little long, guys. We should wrap this up.
Yeah, I think maybe we're taking this too far. I feel like we do need to talk about the interrogation scene a bit, though, because that is the most famous scene in this film. The scene where Catherine Trammell flashes all of these extremely horny, sweaty, male, middle-aged cops who are attempting to interrogate her, and is possibly Wayne Knight's finest moment on screen ever.
Yeah.
He's so good. He's so great in that. And I had read that Spielberg had, watched the movie, and he when he saw Wayne Knight, he's like, cast that guy for a Jurassic Park. Wayne Knight's awesome in this. I think obviously I like him as Newman in Seinfeld, but he really makes, like, for Sharon Stone, she needs that kind of like someone to play as opposite as possible to sell the thing or just be affected by it in such a lecherous way, and it's perfect.
Yeah, and just everything about the way that scene is constructed. And I think if you want a demonstration of what Paul Verhoeven can do and how he can make this material just work, the way that scene is edited, the camera movements. There's one scene where Catherine Trammell says something kind of personal about Nick, Michael Douglas's character, and the cops are obviously all sort of like surprised and intrigued by what is their relationship. And two of the cops, maybe it might be Wayne Knight and one of the others, and as she says it, their heads turn in unison as if they're like velociraptors or something like that. And it's just so perfectly constructed, and then the camera moves along with them, and it's just like genius. Everything about that scene is so perfectly constructed. I love it.
Absolutely.
Jason has been once again rendered speechless by this film.
Still thinking about how you could choose the hot tub over the beach for certain activities.
Anyway,
Josh,
I'm choosing neither of these. I think we should maybe wrap this up.
Hey, I had a question, Josh. I do have one question, though.
Yeah.
So Dorothy Malone, who plays Hazel, the older woman who murdered her family and is out, and who won a supporting actress Oscar in 1956 for Written in the Wind and was the star of Peyton Place.
Nice.
She, good for you, Josh.
Classic. Cirque. Good stuff.
All right. Also in The Big Sleep, Josh. Not my question. My question is, we know that Catherine Trammell's bisexual. She has this relationship with Roxy. And we see this kind of interesting relationship with Catherine and Hazel. And at the end, when Nick goes to visit Catherine at her house, Hazel comes out from upstairs like she's already been in the house. And the way Catherine or Sharon Stone touches her, it kind of led me to believe that they were having a relationship. Did you get that?
Oh, yeah, 100%. And the way that she comes down the stairs like that is a mirror of the way that Roxy, who we know that Catherine had a relationship with, comes down the stairs in the first scene where they attempt to go interrogate her at her house. So whether that's intentional or not, I feel like it has to be the way it's mirrored like that. Absolutely. I got that impression that they were having some sort of sexual romantic thing. I don't know what else Hazel would be doing in the movie.
Cougars on the prowl.
Yeah. I mean, Catherine is clearly someone with very wide ranging tastes in that area. And absolutely, I could imagine.
Yeah. And we're cool with that as long as she doesn't do murders.
Right. The murders, to be clear, the problem is the murder and not the sex. So,
I think she did a lot of murders, Josh. Do you think she did a lot of murders?
I guess we have to talk about that maybe before we wrap up. The ending, which is extremely convoluted, but ultimately basically comes down on the idea that Jeanne Tripplehorn's character had been obsessed with Catherine Trammell because they had met in college, and that she committed these murders and framed Catherine based on the book that Catherine had written, where she described a similar kind of murder to the one that takes place in the opening. And we think that's all wrapped up. Maybe she's obviously been arrested. That's when the captain tells Nick, good job, or whatever. And we've got a happily ever after with Nick and Catherine. And there are so many fake outs in that final sex scene. It's hilarious how many times Verhoeven seems to be indicating that Catherine is going to grab an ice pick and then she doesn't. But finally, in the last scene, we pan down to the last shot, yes. We pan down to under the bed, and there is the ice pick, implying what exactly?
Right. Is it implying that she's been murdering all along? Is it implying that now that all this has happened, she feels like she's in the clear and can do the murder? Is it implying she's going to do the murder and escape because she has access to all this money before they can catch her? We don't know, but I'm thinking they both did murders in my mind, Josh. Both. I mean, there was an obsession angle with the both of them. I think they were both murderers.
My impression of that last shot is that it's just a straight up wink. It's breaking the fourth wall, basically. And it doesn't play into the plot at all, really.
It's the rat in The Departed.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, another way that I thought it could be interpreted is that maybe she did do the murders and she, in that moment, is like, should I murder Michael Douglas? Nah, I actually like him. And so she leaves the ice pick under the bed and decides that they're going to give it a go or whatever. Or maybe, since we've clearly established that they both like using ice picks to pick ice.
Pick ice?
Which seems like a very inconvenient way to make
That's a good thing to do with an ice pick, Josh.
Right. And we've established that they have these in the house. Maybe it just fell under the bed. After they picked some ice with it, they dropped it.
So you're saying she didn't even know it was there. That's your interpretation of it.
What I'm saying is that there is no right interpretation. And the idea that you need to add this up like a math problem is not enhancing your experience of viewing this film. So I guess what I'm saying is that it doesn't matter to me as a viewer or appreciator of this film, whether I know who committed the murders and whether I decide that it is Sharon Stone who did it or Jeanne Tripplehorn who did it. I still had fun watching the movie.
I think, now that we're talking about this, I think it was cruising. where we had the same issue with Ebert, where he was talking about that. And we both felt there were enough ways to interpret it where that didn't bother us. There was enough there. So.
Right. And I think maybe cruising was influencing me as I was watching this movie because I didn't remember all that much. And at one point in the movie, I thought, is there an ending where it implies that Michael Douglas committed the murders, which is the ending of Cruising? But that is not one of the things
with Al Pacino, not with Michael Douglas.
With the cop character who is investigating.
Because that would have been really out of left field if you were watching Cruising.
Yes.
And then the last shot is Michael Douglas. And you're like, where have you been this whole movie?
He wasn't in this movie.
Yeah.
But no, the idea that the cop who is investigating the crimes is somehow the killer. And that is not something I think that you can get in any way from this movie. But the ambiguity of it, to me, is just, it's another part of the absolute insanity of this film. And I went with it. So should we rate this out of 5 ice picks?
I guess that's kind of,
or some perverted sexual thing. Take your pick, Jason.
5 spread eagles, Josh?
Why not?
5 Theodore Beaver cleavers, Josh?
Sure. Whatever.
As I said, there were so many things I enjoyed. And then it just took me right out of it. I'm giving it 3, but it could have fluctuated up to 4 or really down to 2.5 based on just that whole situation. So I'll give it 3. When you're looking at it, that's not a bad amount of vaginas to have.
I mean, if one person had that many, it would be bad, I think.
That would be rough. Yeah, that would be rough. So,
I give it 3.5. I had fun with it. It certainly is problematic in some ways. Its depiction of gay people and all of that is still a bit rough and is so ridiculous overall. But I did have fun watching it, and I love the performances and Paul Verhoeven's direction. So 3.5 spread eagles from me. Dave, how would you rate this?
How do you even spread a half an eagle, Josh?
I don't want to know.
One leg open and keep a cloth on the other one there.
I don't want to think about it.
Oh boy. Well, you know what? I'll add that up because I'm going 3.5. So now we've got an even number there for all of us. But yeah,
even number of spread eagles there.
Yeah. So I'm going 3.5 as well. Right. I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, it's just a fun experience. It's like a roller coaster ride kind of film.
Perfect movie to watch with your parents on New Year's Eve.
That I think
when you're a teenager. Yeah.
So we'll come back and talk about the legacy of Basic Instinct. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this season finale of our season on the films of 1992, we are talking about the Audience Choice winner, which was Basic Instinct from director Paul Verhoeven. And of course, because this was a huge, huge hit, part of the legacy was that both Paul Verhoeven and screenwriter Joe Eszterhas had a chance to kind of do what they wanted. And Verhoeven was a major director for most of the 90s here. Of course, the next thing that Eszterhas and Verhoeven teamed up on is the film Showgirls, which is one of the most famous flops of all time, although it does have a cult following right now.
And is not a flop now. It's turned a profit.
Yeah, over time with various re-releases and everything. But at the time it was released, it was a hugely notorious failure. But I think it does a lot of the same things that this movie does. It maybe doesn't do them as successfully, in part because Elizabeth Berkley is not up to the challenge in the way that Sharon Stone is in this film. But it is intentionally totally over the top and ridiculous. And I think Verhoeven is good at doing that, whether it's in this erotic thriller context or in the sci-fi action context. Starship Troopers is another film of his that I feel like has been misinterpreted and now has this big following as a sort of satire of that kind of jingoistic action film. In more recent years, he's done kind of art house type films. He's gone back to Europe, where he is from, and made films like Black Book and Elle and Benedetta just from this past year, which had its own controversy about the lesbian nun. And there's a scene in that film where she turns a statue of Jesus into a dildo. And I mean, Verhoeven certainly not losing any step in his creation of controversial ridiculousness as his career has gone on.
There you go. Josh, Black Book is hugely successful. He's so successful, Verhoeven, that they said that Black Book is the greatest Dutch movie ever made. What do you think about that, Josh?
You know, I haven't seen enough Dutch movies probably to make an assessment on that, but certainly he is one of the most famous filmmakers from there, if not the most famous. And a lot of his early films, I haven't seen. I think I've seen all of his
Turkish
films.
Delight was nominated for Best Foreign Oscar Award at some point. Best
Yeah,
foreign film.
and some of the reviews of Basic Instinct talk about his film. I think it's called The Fourth Man. That is a similar kind of thriller. Yeah, The Fourth Man from 1983. That is a psychological thriller that has some similar aspects to Basic Instinct. And I haven't seen those early films. I've seen everything that he made, starting with, I think, RoboCop in '87, and some fascinating stuff there. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if he is the most successful Dutch filmmaker of all time.
And Dave, if you were going to take a piece of religious iconography and turn it into a sex toy, which would you choose and why?
Yeah, I don't know if our listeners really want to hear that.
I feel like this is a Jewish Dave thing, right? MC Rankin and Jewish Dave would have a rap song about like turning a menorah into a dildo. Is that?
Yeah, I was going to say, where would you fit that Star of David? And how would you fit it in there?
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Anyway,
Josh, let's get to Joe Eszterhas. One of, as you said, he and Shane Black, the legendary battles for the largest spec sales of all time. I remember it was such like as a guy who wanted to be a screenwriter, you'd wake up and you'd be like, whoa, you would hear these legends of how they're selling them for $2 and $3 million and up to $4 million. And Eszterhas wrote Flashdance, Jagged Edge, Nowhere to Run, One Night Stand. And I was reading a lot about him, and they was saying like One Night Stand, for instance, was a movie that he took his name off of because he didn't recognize what Mike Figgis did to it. So like some of these movies of his that turned out not so well, like Jade, right? He would watch it and he'd be like, this is garbage. This isn't what I turned in. So we can't always blame him. But we were talking about having sex with a dog in the last episode. One of the screenplays that he wrote was called Sacred Cows. And it was about a politician who has sex with a cow, and his rival gets a photo or a video of it and uses it to blackmail him. And that was never made. And we're all worse off for it.
Yeah, I'm sure that would have been something. But yeah, Jade, I think, was the one that was like the end of that period for him, where he had sold that screenplay for so much money and the movie was such a failure. And that was also David Caruso's like big bid to become a movie star after leaving NYPD Blue, and it kind of killed both of them in terms of this huge fame.
Well, I think it's because Jade and Showgirls came out so close to each other. But shout out to Linda Fiorentino from Jade, who was in one of the other most famous erotic thrillers of the 90s, The Last Seduction.
Yes, indeed. And
I saw Jade at the theater with my dad.
God damn it, Dave. Do you have a favorite? Erotic thrillers, the genre has really died off, I'd say, since the late 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about it recently because there have been some movies that have tried to revive it. The Adrian Lyne film with Ben Affleck and Ana de Armas. Yeah, Deep Water. There was a film on Amazon that got some attention called The Voyeurs. So I feel like there's efforts to revive this that don't exactly work. The You Must Remember This, Karina Longworth's Hollywood History podcast that's extremely popular, just did a whole season on 80s erotic thrillers, and I think is about to do a season on 90s erotic thrillers, where I'm sure Basic Instinct will come up. So it's something that people are talking about, but is not experiencing the revival necessarily that they're looking for. So
they're not executing it in as effective a way, I'd say, right?
Right. I think that is part of it. Although those recent movies, both Deep Water and especially The Voyeurs, I think have their fans and have people who think they are actually brilliant movies that capture the spirit of those classic erotic thrillers. I think Adrian Lyne has done some good stuff. I like Unfaithful a lot with Richard Gere and Diane Lane. I think that's a really good movie, and Diane Lane is fantastic in that. And I think got an Oscar nomination for it. So, on the level of like semi-respectability there.
Well, you got to talk about Fatal Attraction. Speaking of Michael Douglas movies, that was a huge hit in '87. And I think going back to the 90s, we talk about like Cruel Intentions and Wild Things. Those are the two that really kind of, I think, tonally really played with it and was tongue in cheek and really did a really good job. Those two, I'd say. Yeah,
I should have mentioned Wild Things is one of my favorite movies, just period. I love Wild Things. And Wild Things could be read almost as like a parody of erotic.
Well, that's what I
movies.
mean, right?
Yeah.
They play with the tone really well.
Yes, I agree. I think that movie is fantastic. And of course, the cheek is a relatively tame place to put your tongue in one of these.
Heyo, my good, wood spoon.
Yeah, thank you.
So Eszterhas, you know, I do think I want to read his books, Hollywood Animal, and then Heaven and Mel, about his destructive relationship with Mel Gibson. Just sounds amazing. Josh, what about Basic Instinct 2? That sounds like a pile of crap.
Yeah, I saw Basic Instinct 2 in the theater, and it was bad. I was looking up what I had written about it at the time, and I think the biggest problem with Basic Instinct that I said, and I think basically everyone said, was that Sharon Stone needs Michael Douglas or someone on the level of Michael Douglas to play off of. They both give these really big performances that match each other in the original Basic Instinct. And in the sequel, which didn't come out until 2006, so obviously they've way past capturing like the zeitgeist of this film anyway. It's David Morrissey is the like police psychologist that Catherine Trammell plays with in that film. It's set in London, and he's just completely like steamrolled by Sharon Stone. They're not matched in any way, and it's a very misguided thing. And I love this quote. Like, this was one of these movies that they were trying to make for many, many years, and they went through a bunch of possible directors. I remember when David Cronenberg was going to direct it, which I think would have been totally fascinating.
Right, exactly. Speaking of erotic thrillers.
Yes, exactly. I think that would have been great, and I would have loved to see that version of it. But they ended up with this director, Michael Caton Jones, who was just kind of a journeyman director. And I love this quote from him. He said, "I was completely broke and had to take anything that came in." And of course, that's exactly the attitude you want from the director of your film. I'm broke and I'm stuck directing this movie.
I mean, that's all fine and fair, Josh, but did they have to do a sex scene where Sharon Stone broke her hip with thrusting? That was a little much for me.
That's not a real thing that happened, right?
No, of course not. So
I feel like it's almost possible that it could have.
Michael Caton Jones went from Doc Hollywood to Basic Instinct 2.
Yeah.
Not in that, you know, I mean, right, he did
with some other steps in between. Yes. But, and also I feel like if you were in a point in your career where you needed to do anything to revive it, like Basic Instinct 2 was the wrong choice there.
I mean, he said he was broke. It wasn't about reviving this.
I guess that's true. So. You know, I'm sure they paid him to direct the film, but yeah, it's bad. It's not worth seeing.
I mean, Michael Douglas, one of the biggest movie stars of all time, and certainly a family legacy with Kirk Douglas. He's got 2 Oscars, one for producing. He's a great producer also, right? Yeah. Producing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and one is, of course, Gordon Gekko. Greed is Good, Wall Street, a great performance. And, you know, he does have 5 Golden Globes. He's got an Emmy for Behind the Candelabra, which I still can't believe. That was the beginning of the end of the box office, I'd say, when you had Michael Douglas playing Liberace, you had Steven Soderbergh directing, you had Matt Damon in it, and it couldn't get a theatrical release. That was when we should have known that the theatrical times of the theater were over, so to speak, Josh. Also, I love him in Traffic.
Yeah, I mean, and Behind the Candelabra, however it was released, is a really good movie. It was released theatrically, I think, overseas, just not here in the US. I love Wonder Boys. That's one of my favorites. Yeah. And he's so good in that. Pre-Basic Instinct, I love The China Syndrome, and he's fantastic. And that was one of, I think, his early efforts as a producer as well. Dave, I know you're a big fan of the Ant-Man movies, which he is in.
I am. They're my favorite Marvel movies to bring Marvel.
Yeah, they're fun. They're fun. Yeah. John, I loved Falling Down. I mean, it's a concept you couldn't do now because white people have gotten so crazy and are horrible at shooting people. And The Game, that's one of my, I think, the most underrated Fincher movies. So, you know, he's co-starred in The Kaminsky Method on Netflix with Alan Arkin, and now he's playing Benjamin Franklin in one limited series and Ronald Reagan in another with about Reagan and Gorbachev.
That will be something to see. So yeah, he's still great, still working very consistently, and of course, right, this massive Hollywood legacy between him and Kirk Douglas.
Right. Sharon Stone, as you mentioned, was nominated for Best Actress for Casino, which she's great in that movie.
She is.
She lost, listen to this, Josh. It was Susan Sarandon won, and the other 3 in that category were Elizabeth Shue for Leaving Las Vegas, Meryl Streep, and Emma Thompson. So, like, pretty big. That's a tough year to be competing in, I'd say.
Yes. Yeah. All worthy competitors there. Yeah. I mean, she's had a very up and down career, from highs like that to appearing in a lot of B movies and stuff. And I feel like her public persona has undergone reevaluations like numerous times if people think that she's underrated or that she's just ridiculous. Speaking of Steven Soderbergh, I never watched his limited series Mosaic, but she was supposedly very, very good in that series as well. Did you see that, Jason?
I'd love to see that, because that was like a weird transmedia piece, right? Where it was like kind of playing up across platforms, while like you'd be watching one episode on like HBO, and then there'd be like a piece that would be on like the HBO site or something like that.
Yeah,
I would like to have seen that.
It was like a choose your own adventure kind of thing, like they have on Netflix now, that had its own app. But I think that was like weirdly limited. And now if you go to HBO and watch it, you can only watch a linear version of it. But I'm sure that version is good as well.
Yeah. We mentioned in our Gloria episode how she remade it in like 99 and none of us saw that. But I did like her on Murderville, the improvised Will Arnett show, where she definitely is just like, I guess I'll go along with this, because she has to improvise everything. And maybe that's not her strength, but it's a very strange juxtaposition. She's also in The Flight Attendant. So, like I said, Josh, supporting wise, you got a lot of great supporting actors. Jeanne Tripplehorn, Sliding Doors, Very Bad Things. She was in Big Love. She got an Emmy nod for her work in the Grey Gardens narrative film. And this past year, she's in The Gilded Age and The Terminal List. So George Dzundza, The Deer Hunter, Dennis Arndt got a Tony nod for Heisenberg, and Chelsea Ross. He was in Buster Scruggs, and he's in Super Pumped coming up. So just a lot of these. And of course, we mentioned Wayne Knight, and also Daniel Van Bargen, who played George's boss in Seinfeld. And
George's boss, who is the IA Internal Affairs Officer. Yeah, and this is one of those movies where everyone, Mitch Pileggi from The X-Files was someone I recognized. James Rebhorn, who is a great character actor.
Right.
Just all of these people. Yes, everyone in even the smallest parts is someone that you are doing that Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the TV meme when you see them.
Right. Jack McGee in Rescue Me, and then of course Steven Tobolowsky, Ned Ryerson.
Yeah, I mean, and so many other great things. Steven Tobolowsky. Going back to Sharon Stone, I did want to mention, I know we hate the Razzies, but Sharon Stone has been nominated for 10 Razzies in her career, which seems like such a huge number. And I thought, is she the one who's been nominated for the most Razzies? And I looked it up. And she was like way down on the list. No, the number one.
Sylvester Stallone?
It's Sylvester Stallone. Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Nice work. I would not have.
How many?
I think it was 15 just for worst actor alone. And that didn't include like worst supporting actor or maybe like writing awards or anything like that. But yeah, he's the
bullshit.
Just the fact that I mean, it was a weird kind of badge of honor to be nominated for so many different kinds of things, including there were a couple of things that she was nominated for that I had never even heard of, but the Razzies.
Once you're on their radar, it's hard to get off, Josh.
I guess so.
Exactly.
Has anyone else's vagina ever been nominated for a Razzie, Josh? That's what I need to know.
Knowing the Razzie, probably yes. I feel like that's something that they would do. So I'm not sure though.
When you were going over the Sharon Stone roles, did you guys mention The Quick and the Dead? Because she's so good in that Sam Raimi movie.
I haven't seen that, but I would really like to. And I know, David, you're a huge Sam Raimi fan.
Oh, yeah. And that's my favorite, outside of Casino and Basic Instinct.
Yeah, I'd like to see that one. I know that's an early DiCaprio role too, I think, right?
Yeah.
Here you go, Josh, for Catherine: Kim Basinger, Julia Roberts, Greta Scacchi, Meg Ryan, Michelle Pfeiffer, Gina Davis, Kathleen Turner. That seems like a natural fit. Kelly Lynch, Ellen Barkin, maybe another natural fit. Mariel Hemingway and Demi Moore all either turned it down or were considered for the role.
Yeah, I think a lot of those could have done a really good job. Demi Moore, Michelle Pfeiffer, I think both have done similar kinds of roles like this and could have.
Not Michelle Pfeiffer.
No, I feel like she's done, think of her as like Catwoman in Batman Returns or something. Speaking of this, in fact,
she's in a leather suit. This is like basically a full-on nude movie. And I don't think Michelle Pfeiffer does nudity.
I wasn't thinking of that. I was thinking of the type of character, this sort of dangerous seductress. But I suppose that is a major concern about it, is you have to find someone who's willing to do all that nudity.
Yeah. So
bigger stars, people who are bigger stars than Sharon Stone at this time would not have been willing to do.
Yeah. And who cares? Like, I'm naked from the waist down right now.
That's good to know. I mean, I think lastly, the legacy thing that I want to mention, just this movie has been parodied and homaged so many times. This is one of those movies that if you have not seen it and you watch it for the first time, it's hard to get that kind of stuff out of your head, I feel like, because there's so many bits. And I think Wayne Knight himself probably participated in a bunch of those.
I think you're right.
Probably.
I mean, one of those scary movies, where they're like, they do a uncrossing of a leg and it's something strange there.
Yeah.
As opposed to someone strange. Hey-o, vagina jokes.
I think we got to end there, really. I think we've
That's
really
a good
done all that
closer,
we can with this film.
We did. Blame the audience on this one. Thank you, audience, for picking it.
Yes, thank you. Of course, we always appreciate. We got a lot of responses. I feel like we've gotten more and more responses to this poll every season that we've done. We got a lot of response to this one, and we very much appreciate everyone who voted for this. Hopefully, the fans of Basic Instinct enjoyed our discussion here.
I mean, Josh, as you mentioned, a lot of people pleasured themselves to this film. So if people are pleasuring themselves to this podcast, we'll take what we
don't
can
want to
get.
know about it. Don't tell us. Please don't write in with that information. That is Basic Instinct, and that is this episode and this season of Awesome Movie Year. Don't tell us about your masturbation habits via our social media.
Yeah, anything.
Yeah.
I mean, but we support we support you. You can go ahead and do it. It's okay.
Keep it private.
It's your body,
Yes. Your body, your
do
choice.
what you got to do. Yeah.
You don't need to know.
So. All right, Josh, we're all over social media, which is a place a lot of people go to find their masturbatory material. So
Still going.
I'm at jasonharriscomedy.com. That's not even true. I've flustered myself. I'm at Jason Harris Comedy on Instagram and Facebook, J Harris Comedy on Twitter. Don't forget my new projects, Eat This Comedy and The Trivia Party. Website's coming soon, but those are up on Instagram. Tell you a website that got stuck in 1992 and was murdered by an ice pick is goforjason.com. We're at awesomemovieyear.com. Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter. Go for Jason on Letterboxd.
I am at joshbellhateseverything.com, at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, and at SignalBleed on Twitter, and at SignalBleed on Letterboxd. And you can listen to our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod, and join our Facebook group Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we talk about all kinds of movies, and a lot of the voting took place.
No, we don't, Jave. All we talk about on there is how long standing ovations last at Venice. I think the group has jumped the shark and we need to reset the whole thing.
Come to the group and contribute something, listeners, and we'll have a variety of discussions in the Popcorn.
It's time for a reset.
Yeah. So, Jason, before we leave 1992, what is in our next episode?
Josh, we're going to go over our season epilogue, the movies we talked about, the ones we didn't talk about, and we'll reveal what's the next season, which I'm going to let you reveal it, Josh, because it's one that you campaigned for. Ooh!
So tune in for all that in our 1992 epilogue, and thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.